originally, Ridley was going to direct this as a feature film. When we were exploring adapting it into the full 6 hour, he was seriously considering at least taking on the first 2 hours himself. And we were planning to break it up amongst multiple directors. Because of the fact that we were trying to draw some pretty big featured talent into this project, made scheduling it to begin with a near impossibility. You're not going to get actors like Alfred and Michael and Alessandro and to commit to the number of months that a 6 hour would take to shoot.
There are key creative elements on this show that need continuity, and there's continuity of story, there's continuity of character, and all of these are impacted by what's going on in the background. There's greater impact by having one director than having this thing have the mark of multiple styles.
And there's not many directors have the balls, if you excuse the expression, to actually address this, saying, yes, I can do 4.5 minutes a day, yes, I can do this for 5.5 months, and yes, I can keep the pace up, and yes, I can keep the quality flying on a very special level. Yes, I can understand the drama, and the millions of questions and minutiae that actually goes to making a 6 hour series such as this.
It soon became clear that we couldn't really have multiple directors, but maybe 2 directors. And when we sat down with McHale, who was one of only a few directors we discussed for the project, Ridley had seen his work on The Grid and a couple of other projects that he'd done. And I mean, McHale's an amazing shooter, first and foremost, so we knew that the look of the picture and the ambitious scope of the picture is something he could singularly achieve to a great effect.
McHale has all of that. He's not afraid, which is one of the prerequisites of any directing job. If you're afraid, you don't like stress, don't do the job.
That's a cut.
McHale likes stress, isn't afraid, and will face any problem, and also has a very nice creative view and a beautiful eye.
When we sat down with McHale, he pitched himself for the full 6. He said, I want to do all of them. And we hadn't really seriously discussed it at that point.
Well, I think a lot of obvious reasons you want to do the whole thing, because the main character goes through all 6 episodes. But it was because I loved all the episodes and I wouldn't know which one to pick. I was in Berlin when I was a kid in the 60s and knew what it looked like in Berlin, how it felt, and that's what we've been trying to recreate here in Budapest. So that was another reason I really felt I had to take on how that should look and the feeling at that time.
Once he gets on set, he's pretty unflappable. Not that he doesn't have his own sort of Danish passions, if you can call them that, but he has such an acute eye for what story he's telling and the way in which he wants to present it, but that he can also handle actors of this caliber and sort of a visual template of this reach.
Well, you have a director who was at one time a very successful cinematographer and has become a successful director. So his ability to take this very complex subject matter from a logistical standpoint and figure out how to tell the story with the camera helps me as a producer. This is very, very ambitious, and you need that kind of a collaborative atmosphere to make it through our days and our schedule.
The scale, the biggest problem in all of this, when you look at it and stand back and say, right, we're about to start a film called The Company, and by the way, it's going to take us into Russia, it's going to take us into Prague, it's going to take us into London, Washington, United States. It's going to cover 40-odd years.
The show is really epic and international in scope. So I thought, why don't we shoot everything in the story that's in North America, like Washington, D.C., Cockroach Alley, Langley, these are the 2 incarnations of the CIA, various other locations around Washington, D.C., and Miami, and a few others. And we did that in Toronto, Ontario. Then we're going to Budapest, Hungary, and in Budapest we're doubling that city for Budapest, Berlin, and Moscow.
You really want to be true to the period, and a period that's so relatively close to our contemporary time is always more difficult in a way, because if it's the Middle Ages, we all know there shouldn't be a phone pole in the shot. But here, many times we said, okay, is this phone pole period or is it not? We've been trying to be very accurate about the look of it, and furniture, for instance, make sure it's not furniture that's newer than the period. So I think we've created a great look and a very authentic feel.
For some reason, there's a great deal of all the old architecture has been saved, and what's been damaged has been replaced as it was. So the city centre has got the most beautiful examples of turn of the century empire architecture and stuff. There's some gorgeous old buildings that have been restored.
Kilian Barracks was a military structure built by, I think, Emperor Franz Joseph. They looked like military installations from 1880s. And of course we had to find something that we could work with. That means the city would give us the permission, we would have cobblestones on the street like it was in the 50s.
The main concern was to recreate the atmosphere of that time, and we've looked at endless amounts of photos from the time and footage, newsreel footage from the time.
We started designing the set, what we can add to the building that we could destroy. The Russians are surrounding the area and are blasting it out, and we did kind of beefed up all the architectural elements like colonnades, windows that were created from concrete posts, something that could withstand attack of shells. And then we had to deal with the city trying to remove everything that was modern. And whatever you see now happens on the exterior, but the same thing will be happening on the inside. We'll be blasting once the cannons shoot, then we'll have particles of the windows structure, the ceiling falling, killing the people. So the director has the possibility of cutting back and forth and having a whole sequence.
'56 is very important for all of us because it was a turning point, because the world could hear from the other side that people didn't want to join that kind of idea. This small, ridiculously small country compared to the Soviet Union, which is the two-thirds of the world, basically, stands up against this dictatorship. It's very romantic and very ridiculous at the same time.
Hungarians particularly seem to just put up such an incredible fight. For such a small nation.
Everyone wants to be free. I mean, I think this is the first thing of all. I mean, just look at Poland in that time, or the Czechs, Hungary. I mean, everybody wants to be free.
The geopolitical activity since the end of World War II has been a remarkable theater in which amazing weirdness has been played. I mean, it's thrillingly creepy.
There's a fantastic museum called the Museum of Terror, which I'm sure you're familiar with, but is a building that's been dedicated. And I also just think that's incredibly honest. They've called it the Museum of Terror. There's no two ways about it. What took place was terrible and horrific and inhumane.
I went there to the House of Terror. I don't know, maybe you know that, here in Budapest. And I mean, I saw this, and I mean, I can understand their hatred, their hate of the Russians. I mean, I have to say it like it is, or like it was, you know.
3, 2, 1, action!
Because it was a brutal fight, brutal war, and I mean, they had no chance at all.
And they had Remembrance Day, October 23rd, which was commemorating the 1956 uprising, and there was a rather unstable situation here at the time that really would have caused a big problem should we have had to shut down. There was a tank on display, and someone had hijacked the tank, for lack of a better word. They didn't get far. It went 150 feet, but as a result, there was an edict. No military vehicles on the street. Without those military vehicles, tanks, armored cars, we couldn't complete the sequence. We couldn't film it. It was a bit of life imitating art, as opposed to art imitating life, maybe.
We filmed in Budapest on the 50th anniversary of the uprising, and now Castro's really sick and probably won't live much longer. It is strange that everything's coming full circle. It's weird.
We are now in Puerto Rico, in Rincon, which is doubling for the Bay of Pigs back in 1961. And I'm coming ashore with these Cubans here that are trying to overthrow Castro and his whole crew. And then you've got a whole Puerto Rican crew here who's all excited to, be filming. And it's definitely, people are on two different wavelengths right now, but we're getting through it, and it's hot.
This part of it has required a tremendous amount of expertise and preparation from Marine coordinators that have coordinated all the support vehicles, all our LCMs, our freighters, all the big ticket items that are in the water. And since we're recreating military maneuvers, we have a gentleman named Jim Deaver, who's our military expert and coordinator, who was the military advisor on Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. And the reason you bring all these experts in is because we're working on a budget and on a finite amount of time that you want everything to go well. You want everyone to show up, everyone to be prepared, and when you have these elements all coordinate everything, it works beautifully.
I'm dreaming for a man like Roberto. I like the man that can die for something. The real man, that has one word. He is a kind of guy that I really want to have as a brother. And so for me, it was just a dream to be in this kind of role, because you have all the best from the human person. The courage, the strength, the passion for the friendship.
You can't help us anymore. Damn it, Roberto! I'll leave when everyone leaves!
And he looking in the eyes, and you believe him. You can give him your heart. And that's wonderful, because today, in these days, it's very hard to find a man like this.
It's a very poignant moment too. That's again, when you have really big action sequences, they mean nothing unless the personal story is intact and is larger than life. There's an All Quiet on the Western Front. Two of them who came from families who had parents, and you could have 6,000 troops, and you can have tanks, and you can have airplanes. But when you meet these two boys together, they're boys in war, and there's more told about the ills of war than all the other stuff around.
I made it, Jack! I'll blow your damn head off! You'll just be another body floating in the surf! They'll never know who you were! Go, Jack. Go now.
And I think we really have that in this sequence here between Raoul Bova and Chris O'Donnell. Watch the movie and you'll know.
yeah, I've only been with Raoul for a few days, and it's been so interesting because when we were in Budapest, we had a lot of German actors and Hungarian actors and, all these different languages trying to either speak with a Russian accent or with an English accent. And now you've got an Italian trying to do a Cuban accent. And it's, the communications amongst the actors and the crews, it's been an adventure the whole way through.
That was my biggest concern when I read the script, is how do we span a period of 30 years believably? And it's almost impossible to make people younger, but it's possible to make people older on film.
All these actors are aging 40 years. So rather than nibbling and cutting and trying to put these rubber caps on to cross your head where you suddenly have a funny head shape in the morning, it's better just to shave your hair off, and we'll hit you with the required wigs over the 40 years, and trust us, it'll be fine. So they're all walking around looking like a bunch of beanheads. But unfortunately today that's trendy.
All these relatively young people we hired for the parts agreed to shave their heads, and we've made wigs with receding hairlines, with gray hair, and so slowly recede. So we have different stages of wigs, and that in addition to a fantastic makeup team that has been able to do age makeup, makes it a very convincing transition.
So the first thing that we had to approach was the quickest and easiest way to age these people with the schedule changing and fast shooting, and devise a way that we could come up with the best possible.
And also it had to be done in such a way that was subtle enough and real enough, because we're filming on high definition television. The work had to be really, really as fine and believable to the eye as possible, because HD TV would throw up any faults within seconds.
Everyone on this had their heads shaved, and they looked like they're part of some strange sect. So Chris has no hair. Alfred Molina has no hair. Rory Cochrane has no hair. There was a film called Coneheads, wasn't there? Do you remember that? Was Michael Keaton in that? No. Anyway, they look like that.
Well, you know, he gets every morning, which he's sick of, and I know I'm sick of, is that we shave his head right down to the skin. That's his first process. And then he's off to Trevor.
And then depending which stage he's going through, I'll then paint like the age marks, the wrinkles, the highlights and the shadows onto his face, and then the main process is the painting on of the plastic and rubber onto his face that is then stretched and powdered. I then take off all the excess powder with a mixture of isopropyl alcohol and castor oil, and he then goes back to Paul.
And then depending on the period or the age that he's at, then we've got the various wigs which are thinned, and you know, some are very thin, you can see his scalp, or very full, and then that is all stuck onto his head, like literally stuck onto his head, and the wigs are all being made literally a hair at a time. So you get as if it's a full head of hair or a thinning head of hair.
I'm happy to say that between Paul Patterson and Trevor Proud, 2 Academy Award-winning artists, Paul is our key hairstylist and Trevor's our key makeup artist, I've got 2 of the best. And you know, half the battle is knowing how to delegate the responsibility to the right people. And I could not have asked for 2 more talented artists to take care of these actors.
Well, look at me, for crying out loud. Yeah, I think I could pull it off like this. In fact, I'm keeping this look for the weekend because I'm going to Quebec. And you know, if I can get away with it there, I'll get away with it anywhere.
They were obviously recruited for something, some inherent qualities that they had, and I think were special guys. But what they were stepping into and what they were volunteering for was a completely unknown world. It was very exciting, I'm sure, for a lot of these young guys, and I think that they went in with real idealistic views of what they wanted to accomplish and how they wanted to serve their country. But I think once they got into the field and saw the realities of what was really happening behind the scenes and what it was like on the front lines, I think it really opened up their eyes.
What's interesting is taking us behind the scenes and watching the administration of these world events and how they're actually dealt with, or not dealt with, or misdealt with. We're all human, and it also shows the insidious nature of the spying process and how, in fact, there were moles inside the CIA. The Kim Philby character, played by Tom, is actually an actual character who was a mole and was a friend of James G. Angleton for all that time, and Angleton didn't realize that he was spilling the beans to this guy every other lunchtime. And that Philby was tied up to the infamous spies Burgess and McLean, who were right in the center of MI5, who actually at a certain point realized the game was up and they better buzz off immediately back to behind the Iron Curtain where they'd be safe, otherwise they would of course be executed in those days.
If you were to take, for instance, one of the scenes we have with Fulbright and Dulles literally debating over whether we should be imposing our will in Cuba the way that the CIA attempted to do.
The United States is eternally condemning Moscow for meddling in the internal affairs of sovereign countries. Intervention in Cuba now will open the door for Soviet intervention anywhere around the world.
The Soviets are already intervening in many countries in the world, Senator.
When you suddenly move that same discussion into an historical context, you're able to really explore the full depth and breadth of it. It resonates very powerfully with what's going on today, but it allows you, hopefully, to have a little bit of distance so people can look at it with a more objective perspective.
In this game, this great game, that my character refers to it as this great game, there is this joy, I suppose, this kind of pleasure or a satisfaction to be found in understanding the nature of that game and the fact that, that's happening over there, but that might not be the real problem. The real problem might be whatever's going on over here. And I think that's what Liddell means by the wilderness of mirrors.
The CIA has had us at its peril, at our peril, for many, many, many years, and they've done so with very little public responsibility. And I thought that it might be an interesting way to give a sense of the elitism that supported it in the beginning, its lineage is having evolved from the OSS, Bill Donovan, that whole universe of Yaleys that were intelligence agents, and the fact that they operated with almost no oversight in very destructive ways. I was not trying to do an affirmation of the CIA, although in the process of developing it and trying to get the movie done, I developed a respect for some of the things they'd done and a great deal of anxiety about many of the other things that they've done.